Hello, my name is Blair. At my own birthday dinner, my sister raised her glass and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "So, what's it like being the family failure?" And they laughed. All of them, including my mother, including my fiancé. That was the moment I stopped asking for a seat at their table. They say family sticks together, but what happens when your family uses your kindness as collateral? What happens when they build their success on your silence, then blame you for your scars? I walked away that night. No screaming. No tears. Just one final choice. But you want to know the most chilling part? It wasn't the insult. It was that I almost stayed. Why do we keep showing up for people who've already left us behind? What if your family was never your home, but the house where they buried you alive? Do you want to know what I did next? It was already dusk when we pulled into my mother's driveway in North Austin. The house looked like it had been lifted out of a lifestyle magazine. String lights hung over the backyard, soft jazz floated through the open patio doors, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. Darian reached over and squeezed my hand. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't. I told him this dinner was just family and close friends, but that word, family, didn't mean comfort to me anymore. Vera, my mother, greeted us at the door wearing her favorite floral dress, her hair pinned neatly in that way that made her look more like the hostess of a charity gala than the mother of 3 grown daughters. "You look wonderful, honey," she said, brushing imaginary dust off my shoulder before turning to Darian. "You must be exhausted from work. Come in, come in." She didn't notice my hesitation. She never did. Callista was already center stage, commanding the conversation like a conductor. Her laughter carried across the yard, perfectly timed, perfectly rehearsed. Eloan hovered near the buffet table, pretending to refill her glass while avoiding eye contact. Zinnia, Callista's teenage daughter, was filming everything for her social media story, whispering comments I couldn't quite catch. The table shimmered with candles and polished silverware, but it all felt like a set built for someone else's life. I smiled because I knew the script. The youngest always smiles, grateful, polite, harmless. We ate, we toasted, and after a while, Callista clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. "Before dessert," she said, "I have something special." The lights dimmed slightly, and a projector screen came alive with photos. Callista's tribute to our family. The first few slides were predictable. Baby Callista in her ballet outfit, teenage Callista at prom, Callista at her wedding looking like a glossy magazine ad. Then came Eloan, always smiling beside her therapist husband, her children in matching outfits. I waited for mine. One slide appeared, me and Darian at a park, but the photo was blurry, cropped so tight you couldn't even see my face clearly. That was it. Darian leaned closer and whispered, "Did she forget to include you?" I smiled without looking at him. "No," I said. "She never forgets. She edits." When the slideshow ended, people clapped politely. Callista stood, soaking in the attention. My mother dabbed her eyes. "So many memories," she said. "None of them mine." Dinner resumed. The wine kept flowing. The air got heavier. I could feel something coming. With my sister, there was always a performance waiting for its cue. Mom raised her glass. "To Blair," she said. "My youngest, my heart. May this year bring you peace." Before I could thank her, Callista cut in. "Oh, come on, Mom," she said, laughing, glass still raised. "Let's make this interesting. So, Blair, what's it like being the family failure?" The words hung there like smoke. Then came the laughter. Not all at once, but enough to sting. Even Eloan let out a nervous chuckle. Zinnia giggled, glancing up from her phone. Darian froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. I looked at my mother. She stared down at her plate. Of course she did. I felt heat rush through my chest, but my face stayed calm. I'd learned that skill early. Don't let them see you flinch. "Callista," I said evenly, "you always did have impeccable timing." She smiled, teeth perfect, voice smooth. "It's a joke, Blair. Don't take everything so personally." I could hear the clinking of silverware, the shifting of chairs, the small sounds people make when they want to disappear. I looked around that table and saw it clearly, every role in this family locked in place like a photograph. Callista the star, Eloan the mediator, Vera the proud matriarch who never noticed the cost of her perfection, and me, the shadow they needed to feel brighter. I rose from my chair slowly, napkin still in hand. You know what's funny? I said. Failure is always loudest when it's afraid. Nobody spoke. Darian stood, hesitated, then followed me. I set my napkin on my plate, took his hand, and walked toward the door. Blair, don't overreact, my mother called out softly. Her voice trembled, but not with guilt, just embarrassment. I didn't look back. The screen door shut behind us with a soft click. Outside, the air was cooler. The stars looked sharper. I could still hear laughter behind the glass, distant now, like echoes from another life. We reached the car. I opened the passenger door and sat down without a word. Darian slid behind the wheel. He started the engine, but neither of us spoke. The headlights swept across the driveway, catching a glimpse of the house, my mother's perfect house, filled with perfect lies. Halfway home, Darian said quietly, I'm sorry, Blair. I didn't know she'd. I cut him off. Don't apologize for her. My voice sounded calm, almost gentle. This isn't new. He glanced at me, but said nothing. The road ahead stretched dark and empty. I turned my face toward the window, watching the city lights blur past. I thought of every time I'd let them rewrite who I was, every small surrender disguised as keeping peace. Tonight had only been the public version of something they'd been doing for years. I wondered when it started. Maybe when I left college to take care of Dad. Maybe when I refused to join Callista's PR firm. Or maybe it didn't start at all. Maybe I was born into it. We reached the apartment, and Darian parked in silence. I unbuckled my seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped out. The air smelled of rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Inside, I slipped off my shoes, left them by the door. The quiet felt heavy but safe. I sat on the couch and stared at nothing. Darian brought me a glass of water and sat across from me. You okay? He asked softly. I'm fine, I said. It wasn't true, but it wasn't a lie either. I'd gone numb in a way that felt familiar. He reached out like he wanted to say something else, then thought better of it. We stayed there, two people in the same room, but worlds apart. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about that slideshow, about the way everyone laughed. How it felt to see my life edited out like I was a glitch they had to crop away. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't beg for understanding or replay what I should have said. I just sat still, breathing, listening to the storm build outside. They had called me a failure. But if failure meant walking away from that table with my dignity intact, maybe it wasn't such a bad title after all. I leaned back, eyes closed, feeling something shift quietly inside me. Something small but solid. I thought it was just a toast, but it was an autopsy. I thought it was just a toast, but it was an autopsy. That sentence kept circling my mind long after Darian had fallen asleep. The apartment was dim, a single lamp still glowing near the couch where I sat, staring at nothing. Outside, the rain had started again, light at first, then heavier, as if the sky itself was restless too. I hadn't even taken off my shoes. The birthday cake my mother had sent home with us still sat untouched on the counter. Chocolate frosting, plastic candle toppled sideways. It looked pitiful. Darian had gone straight to the shower when we got back. I could hear the water running through the thin walls. When it stopped, silence pressed against everything, against my chest, against the floorboards. He came out a few minutes later, towel over his shoulders, hair damp, looking unsure whether to speak. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded, still watching the window. He hesitated, phone in his hand, thumb hovering like he wanted to scroll, but didn't know what for. She shouldn't have said that, he added finally. It wasn't fair. It wasn't surprising either, I said. My voice came out calm, detached, almost foreign. He looked at me like he wanted to fix something, but didn't know where to start. Then he sighed and sat down beside me, staring at the floor. The only sound left was the rain. After a while, he stood and said, "I'll head to bed." I nodded again, not trusting what might come out if I opened my mouth. When the bedroom door clicked shut, the apartment felt enormous. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, my own breath loud in my ears. The slideshow replayed in my mind, each missing photograph like a tiny cut. They hadn't erased me by accident. They'd done it by design. I must have dozed off on the couch because when I woke, the rain had stopped. The digital clock on the microwave read 3:12 a.m. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I sat up, disoriented, and that's when I heard a single ping from the kitchen counter. Darian's phone lit up, screen facing up. I wasn't snooping, it just caught my eye. A text preview glowed bright in the dark. "Callista, just so you know, Blair's had episodes before. She doesn't mean harm, but she spirals fast. I thought you should know." My chest went cold. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Episodes. Spirals. The words stung worse than anything she'd said in person. She wasn't just humiliating me anymore. She was rewriting me. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. The message was burned into my mind already. I walked quietly to the bedroom. Darian was asleep, one arm over his head, peaceful in a way I couldn't remember feeling. I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at him. Did he believe her? Had she planted this seed long before tonight? I lay back beside him, eyes open in the dark, thinking about how easy it is for lies to sound like concern when they come from someone charming enough to smile while saying them. When morning light crept through the blinds, Darian was already in the kitchen making coffee. "You were up late," he said. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. He poured me a mug, added cream the way I liked, set it down in front of me. "You should ignore her. She gets dramatic." That word, dramatic, hit like another slap. I smiled thinly. "You think I'm overreacting?" "No, I just think she pushes buttons." Maybe she didn't mean it the way it sounded. "She meant it exactly that way," I said. He didn't argue. He just sipped his coffee and glanced at his phone. I knew the message was still there. After he left for work, the apartment was mine again. I stood by the window, cup cooling in my hands. The city outside moved on like nothing had happened. Cars passing, someone walking a dog, a delivery truck pulling up next door. Life continued, indifferent. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and tried to work. My nonprofit's homepage glowed back at me, Women Forward, rebuilding independence after financial abuse. The irony made me laugh under my breath. I'd spent years helping women untangle themselves from manipulative families, from people who called them unstable just to keep control. And now here I was, living the same story I thought I'd outgrown. My phone buzzed with a new email, our quarterly impact report. I clicked it open. The numbers were solid. More women enrolled in programs, more donations, more community partners. Proof that what I built mattered. Yet somehow, my family still saw me as the one who couldn't make it. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. My mind slipped back to another dinner table, 2 years ago. We were all at Mom's for Thanksgiving. I'd just told them I was leaving my finance job to run the nonprofit full-time. Callista had laughed, glass in hand. "Helping women start over? That's sweet, Blair. But maybe keep a part-time job, for when reality hits." Mom had chuckled softly, saying, "Your sister's just worried for you." I'd said, "Helping women rebuild their lives is more than a hobby." Callista smirked. "Sure, because saving the world pays so well." That line had followed me ever since. Every time my program was mentioned in the local paper, Callista would post something online, like proud of my little sister for following her passion project. Passion project, code for not a real career. Back then, I'd brushed it off. Family's tease, right? That's what I told myself. But sitting here now, reading that message she'd sent to Darian, I saw it for what it was, a slow burn of discrediting, one polite insult at a time. I opened my nonprofit spreadsheets, scrolling through the financials, the data, the measurable impact. Every number on that screen represented someone I'd helped find her footing again. Real women who'd trusted me. My work wasn't some lemonade stand. It was the reason I got out of bed every morning. I whispered to the empty room, and yet they treat me like I'm playing make-believe. Something shifted inside me then, not anger exactly, but a tightening, like steel cooling after heat. I wasn't going to argue my worth anymore. I closed the laptop gently, stood up, and walked to the kitchen. The slice of cake still sat on the counter. I picked it up and dropped it into the trash. The sound it made was small, final. In the quiet that followed, I realized what this really was. Callista's message wasn't about warning Darian. It was about warning me, reminding me of my place, the role she'd written for me since childhood. But I wasn't going to play it anymore. I washed the coffee mug, dried it, and set it on the rack. Through the window, the sky was clearing, streaks of gold breaking through the gray. They could keep their perfect photos, their curated versions of truth. I had my own record of every hour worked, every woman helped, every piece of myself I'd refused to surrender. They don't get to rewrite me in a story I built myself. Morning light leaked through the blinds at the office as I clicked through my emails, half reading lines that didn't register. My staff had left an hour ago, leaving behind the faint hum of computers and the smell of burnt coffee. The quiet didn't bother me. It gave me space to think, though lately that wasn't always a good thing. The book my mother had given me for my birthday sat near my keyboard, still in its shiny gold wrapping paper. I hadn't opened it before. I didn't expect much. Mom always liked gifts that said more about herself than about you. Floral scarves, scented candles, self-help books she never read. Still, I reached for the small parcel, tore the paper slowly, and stared at what was inside. The art of letting go. Of course. When I opened the cover, a note fell out, handwritten in blue ink. Happy birthday, honey. Love, Mom. I felt something twist in my stomach. I turned to the inside flap, and that's when I froze. My own handwriting stared back at me. To Callista, for your new beginning. Love, Blair. It was the same book, the same copy I'd given my sister 5 years ago when she'd left her husband. I could almost see the smudge from where my thumb had pressed the ink while writing that note. Mom had rewrapped it and given it back to me as though I wouldn't notice. For a long minute, I just sat there, holding it open, unable to move. The room felt smaller somehow. It wasn't the gift that hurt, it was the message behind it. I wasn't worth new paper, new thought, new effort. Just leftovers. A recycled sentiment, wrapped in politeness. That book was a mirror, showing exactly where I stood in this family, a placeholder, a utility, never the center. I set it down and looked out the window. The sky was gray, threatening rain, the same way it had the night of my birthday dinner. I tried to shake it off, but the memory clung to me. My reflection in the glass looked older than I felt. Maybe that's why the memories came rushing back, the ones I'd trained myself not to revisit. Junior year of college, I was 21 when the phone call came. Dad's cancer had returned. The doctors said it was aggressive this time. I remembered sitting on the edge of my dorm bed, listening to Mom's voice crack on the other end. He's asking for you, she'd said. He needs help. So I packed my things, dropped out before finals. My friends thought I'd lost my mind, but there wasn't a question in me. I came home. Those 10 months were the longest and shortest of my life. I learned how to change for bags, how to argue with insurance reps, how to hold a man's dignity while he slowly faded. There were nights I'd sit by his bed, whispering stories just to keep his eyes open. He'd always say, "You're stronger than you think." When he passed, I was the one who found him. I didn't scream. I just held his hand until it went cold. Callista came home for the funeral in her crisp black dress, makeup perfect, speaking in phrases that sounded rehearsed for sympathy cards. "You're brave," she told me as she hugged me, her perfume thick and sweet. But by the next Thanksgiving, I overheard her telling Aunt Lydia, she just couldn't handle the pressure. Always runs when things get hard. I remember standing by the sink, holding a plate, my hands trembling. That was how quickly it happened, the rewrite. Over time, the story hardened. To the rest of the family, I'd quit college because I couldn't keep up. Dad's care became a phase I went through, not a sacrifice. They spoke about it like it was an inconvenience they'd had to manage. No one corrected it. Not even Mom. Especially not Mom. I can still hear her voice from one Thanksgiving after Dad died. I'd come by for dinner, my first holiday back at work. Mom was telling a neighbor, Callista's always been the steady one. That girl never gives up. She said it while slicing pie, her tone casual, like she was stating the weather. And there I was again, invisible at the same table I'd built my life around. Even Aloan, sweet, quiet Aloan, never spoke up. She'd just look at me with pity, as if silence was compassion. It wasn't. Silence was complicity. I think what hurt most wasn't their words, it was what Dad didn't say at the end. When the medication made him forget small things, he started calling me Kiddo instead of Bear, the nickname he'd used since I was little. It was small, but it felt like losing something sacred. Now, sitting at my desk years later, I opened a folder on my computer and scrolled through the old records I'd kept. The hospital discharge forms, the insurance receipts, the hospice volunteer notes. Proof that I'd been there. Proof that my life hadn't paused for nothing. My eyes blurred as I scrolled. I'd built a life out of everything they dismissed. Every scrap of what they called failure had become foundation. And yet, even now, their version of the story lived louder than the truth. They'd made me invisible while I was holding them up. I took a deep breath, closed the files, and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat on an empty page. This is not about making them see me, I whispered aloud. This is about me seeing myself again. I reached for my notebook, the one I kept for when the thoughts got too heavy, and started writing. Page 1. The first lie was that I quit. The words came easily. My hands shook, but I didn't stop. Each line felt like a small reclamation, a quiet rebellion against their version of me. After a while, I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Corrections. Inside it, I began saving everything that mattered: letters, records, memories, fragments of truth. Each file felt like a brick laid down on my own terms. Outside, rain began to fall, soft against the window. It felt fitting, cleansing even. I looked at the regifted book again, still open to my old note. For your new beginning. I smiled faintly. Guess I'll take it back, I said to no one. Then I closed the book, slid it into my drawer, and turned off the light. The office fell into darkness, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small inside it. If they were going to build a story without me, I'd build the truth without them. The difference between gaslight and daylight is only what you choose to believe. That thought echoed in my head as I stood barefoot in the kitchen, hands resting on the counter. The apartment smelled faintly of ginger tea, though the kettle on the stove had never whistled. I'd turned the burner on nearly 20 minutes earlier, then forgotten all about it. Outside, twilight was settling over Austin, amber streaks cutting through a pale sky. It had been a long day, mostly quiet, except for the loudness inside my chest. Darian stepped in from the balcony, rubbing his arms from the chill. You've been quiet, he said casually, not accusing. I'm processing, I answered, without turning to face him. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. He pulled a chair out and sat down at the table. His phone buzzed once, then again. He silenced it and looked at me, brows furrowed like he was trying to read me without making it obvious. I've been thinking, he began, slowly, the way someone walks on gravel barefoot. Do you think maybe sometimes you misinterpret their intentions? I blinked once, then twice. My fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. You mean the slideshow, I said. He shifted. I mean, Callista can be blunt. Yeah. But malicious? I don't think so. She's wired differently. I finally turned around. She's wired to humiliate people who don't play by her script. That's not wiring, Darian. That's a choice. He opened his mouth, hesitated, then continued anyway. Your mom, I don't think she meant anything by it either. She was trying to make things nice. I let out a short, dry laugh. Even if she edited me out of my own birthday? That landed like a rock. Silence filled the room like fog. He looked away. I looked down. The tea kettle began to whistle softly, like it had been waiting for the cue. I turned the burner off and poured the water into the mug, letting the steam rise and wrap around my face. My phone buzzed on the counter. A voicemail. I didn't need to check to know who it was. I walked into the living room and pressed play. Vera's voice crackled through. Blair, honey. Listen, I think you're overreacting a little. We didn't mean to make you feel left out. The slideshow? That was Callista's thing, not mine.
You know how she is.
Don't let this ruin everything. It was just a dinner. Her tone was syrupy, carefully measured. The way someone might talk to a child they don't want to provoke.
I didn't reply.
I played it again, then a third time. Each listen stripped another layer of illusion. It wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't say.
No sorry.
No ownership. Just a rerouting of blame. Callista did this, you misunderstood that. As if my absence in that slideshow had somehow been my fault. I set the phone down and walked back into the kitchen. Darian was rinsing his cup in the sink. If you can't see how they erase me, I said, you're not looking close enough. He paused, holding the cup under the faucet, then turned the water off. I'm trying to see you, Blair. I am. But you're still giving them the benefit of the doubt, I said. That's the problem. I stopped getting that luxury years ago.
He looked at me.
Really looked. Then nodded slowly, but said nothing. There it was. Not a slammed door. Not a yelling match.
Just
the click of a lock turning quietly. We moved around each other the rest of the night like polite roommates. I picked up the laundry basket and folded towels in the living room. He took a shower. I reheated leftovers. He ate cereal. By the time I slid into bed, he was already asleep, breathing slow and steady. I watched the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of the fan. I picked up my journal from the nightstand and flipped it open. The last page read, "They don't get to rewrite me in a story I built myself." Below it, I added, "This is the last time I explain myself to someone who chooses not to see." Then I drew a small box around it. A quiet promise. I didn't know exactly what I was planning yet, but I knew this much. It wouldn't be loud. I wasn't going to throw plates or send angry texts or post cryptic messages online. I'd learned a long time ago that true exits don't need announcements. They just require intention. I started with small things. That week, I pulled my name from the family Netflix account, then the Spotify plan. I called a pharmacy and removed myself from the automatic refill list tied to Vera's family insurance. None of it would cause a stir right away, but it was mine. A slow, deliberate extraction. A few days later, I got a text from Aloan. It was short, polite. "Mom says you're being dramatic again. You okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Then I erased what I wrote, over and over. Eventually, I just sent, "Define okay." She didn't reply. By Friday, I'd gone through every shared account, every tie that bound me to their ecosystem. Each click, each password change felt like pulling a thread from a sweater that had choked me for too long. It wasn't revenge. It was exit. And I was already halfway gone. The difference between gaslight and daylight is only what you choose to believe. And I was done believing what they needed me to swallow. The difference between gaslight and daylight is only what you choose to believe. I had chosen daylight. But daylight has a cruel way of showing you everything you've ignored. Friday afternoon, the office was quiet. Everyone had gone home early for the weekend, their laughter trailing out the glass door like an echo of a lighter life. I stayed behind, staring at the glow of my computer screen, the hum of the air conditioning filling the silence. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until my nonprofit dashboard asked for a password. That was odd. I never logged out. I typed it in anyway. Access denied. I tried again. Same result. My stomach tightened. I clicked forgot password, followed the reset link, and hit another wall. Administrative privileges required. Administrative privileges. I owned the organization. I built it from a spare bedroom and a dream. There were no administrators except me. A cold wave crept up my spine. I opened the registration page, checking the WHOAS records tied to our domain. The primary contact listed wasn't my email anymore. It was Callista's. For a moment, I couldn't even feel anger. Just disbelief. I scrolled through the details, updated mailing address, contact number, even the EIN reference. Every line whispered, "You trusted the wrong person." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light above flickered once, like even it couldn't stand to see this. I'd brought Callista in years ago, when I'd first founded Women Forward. She'd helped me get through the initial grant applications, told me she could lend some credibility. She was a PR professional. After all, her name looked good on paper. I never questioned it. I was too busy doing the actual work. I opened my email archives and started digging. There they were, messages from 5 years back, full of polite manipulation. "Don't worry about the paperwork, Blair. I'll handle the boring stuff. You focus on helping people. I'll take care of the business side." And then, months later, small updates, nothing major. Just simplifying who gets the notifications.
Simplifying.
She'd been shifting ownership inch by inch while pretending to support me. I scrolled further. My heart sank as I found one line in a tax submission she'd prepared. Under Executive Director, she'd written Callista Walker. She'd made herself the face of my life's work.
Quietly. Casually.
Perfectly. I sat there in the dim office, hands trembling above the keyboard. Not from rage, but from recognition. I'd been here before. They take, they rename, they erase, and call it helping. For a long time, I didn't move. Then I closed the laptop, packed it into my bag, and turned off the lights. By the time I got home, the sky was bruised purple, clouds thickening over the city. I made myself a cup of tea and started organizing the boxes I'd been meaning to sort through since last winter. Something about touching old things always grounded me when life felt untethered. The third box from the bottom was marked Dad's Files. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were old tax folders, warranty slips, a couple of books with notes in his handwriting. Near the bottom was a small envelope, yellowed with age, my name written across it in his looping scrawl. For Blair. Only Blair. My throat tightened. I sat down on the floor, turned on the lamp beside the couch, and carefully opened it. Inside was a letter and a small envelope slip, proof of appraisal for a vintage family ring I hadn't seen since before he died. I'd thought it was gone forever. The letter began simply. "Sweetheart, they won't always understand what I see in you. That's okay. I didn't raise you to need their permission. You see things they can't because you're not looking for applause, you're looking for truth." I blinked hard, tears threatening but refusing to fall. He'd written this while he was sick. His handwriting slanted near the end, shaky but certain. He knew. Even then, he knew what I'd be up against. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the coffee table. For a while, I just sat there, watching the candle flame tremble. Grief washed through me, not sharp anymore, just deep and steady, like an old river. When the tears finally came, they weren't for him. They were for me, for the girl who'd needed to hear those words years ago, and never did. I reached for a new folder and wrote on the front with a marker, "Inheritance of Truth." The letter went inside first. Then copies of my nonprofit registration, bank statements, tax forms, everything that could prove what I'd built. I didn't cry again. I'd cried enough for them. Now I was documenting. I opened my laptop once more. The rain outside had started to fall in steady streaks against the window. I began combing through every shared account and payment connected to the family name, insurance, credit cards, phone plans. Each click was a revelation. My name was everywhere. Co-signer, secondary contact, backup guarantor. No wonder Callista had walked through life like nothing could touch her. She'd built her comfort on the foundation of my quiet reliability. The irony almost made me laugh. They called me a failure, but they couldn't function without me. I took a deep breath and opened my email. My fingers didn't hesitate. Subject: Financial Audit Request.
Body:
I'd like to review every shared liability currently under my name. Please provide a complete list and recommendations for removal. Immediate action preferred. Then I wrote to a contact at a local law firm I'd once worked with for donor contracts. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to separate themselves from family-linked financial exposure, what's the best approach? Asking for a client and myself. I read both messages twice, then hit send. My pulse steadied. My thoughts, too. This wasn't retaliation. It was protection. For years, I'd mistaken patience for strength. Tonight, I learned the difference. I gathered the papers on the table, slid them into the new folder beside the letter, and labeled the edge neatly before placing it in my desk drawer. They thought my silence meant surrender. They'd been mistaking my quiet for weakness all along. But I wasn't retreating. I was just building my case. They took my silence for surrender. I was just building my case. By the following Monday, I was ready to move. I told myself it was just a routine review, a check-in with my financial advisor, but I knew better. This wasn't about routine, it was about proof. The kind that didn't vanish in arguments or get twisted into you remembered wrong. The sky was pale when I left the apartment, cool air brushing against my face. Austin in late October had that sharp edge before winter, the kind that smelled faintly of cedar and distant rain. I parked outside the small glass building that housed my advisor's office and sat for a moment, gathering myself. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat wasn't. Inside, the waiting room was quiet except for the soft hum of the printer and a receptionist typing gently. "He'll see you in just a minute, Ms. Dawson," she said. When I walked into the office, Greg, my financial advisor, smiled warmly as if we were about to discuss vacation savings. "Blair, haven't seen you in a while. You've been busy changing the world, I bet." I sat down, forcing a smile. "Something like that." He opened his laptop. "So, what brings you in?" "Just an annual review." "Let's call it that," I said. "But I want to look through every open account linked to my name, including anything with family members." His smile faded. "Of course. Give me a moment." The tapping of his keyboard filled the silence. Then he frowned, tilting the screen slightly toward himself. "That's odd." My pulse quickened. "What is?" "There's a personal loan here, $27,000. Opened 3 years ago. It's listed under your name, but the payments are being withdrawn from a joint family trust. You recognize that?" I blinked. "I don't have a joint family trust." He scrolled further, confusion deepening. "The mailing address is in Cedar Park, not yours. That sound familiar?" It was Callista's address. The air seemed to thin around me. "I never signed for that," I said, my voice low, calm. "I want documentation of every transaction tied to it, every signature, every date." Greg looked uneasy. "Blair, this might have been an oversight. Maybe someone used the wrong." "No," I interrupted. "I want it shut down. Immediately. And every joint account closed. If it burns a bridge, that bridge wasn't real." He looked at me, measuring. "Are you sure?" "Dead sure." He hesitated a moment longer, then nodded and began printing documents. My signature repeated over and over, the loops and slants unmistakably mine, but I knew my own hand, and those weren't it. Someone had practiced. Someone who'd watched me write my name since childhood. As I signed the cancellation papers, a strange calm settled over me. Rage had burned off days ago, leaving only clarity. When I left the office, the air felt colder. I stood outside for a moment, letting the wind hit my face. Cars passed, leaves scraped along the pavement. Life continued, and I was finally stepping out of the shadow they'd built around me. Back home, I opened my laptop. I started methodically deleting things. My name from the family cell plan, the insurance portal, the shared Netflix account. I removed my email as secondary contact for the utilities on Vera's house. My fingers moved quickly, precise, each click a small liberation. Then I went deeper. Subscriptions, delivery services, the streaming bundle Callista had once called a family perk.
Gone.
The more I erased myself from their systems, the lighter I felt. It wasn't vindictive, it was necessary, like cleaning out mold. At one point, I paused to make tea, glancing around the kitchen that had once felt too quiet. Now, silence felt like peace. I remembered a line from one of Dad's old home videos. He was in the backyard, building a fence, speaking into the camera Mom had been holding. Real strength isn't loud, he'd said. It's lasting. I smiled faintly, whispering it out loud. It's lasting. Later, I opened a spreadsheet to track what I'd already separated: insurance, bank cards, even my AAA membership. It looked clinical, detached, but it gave me power. I'd spent years trying to fix the family dynamic through compassion. Now I understood. Compassion without boundaries is just enabling. By dusk, the last of the to-do list was checked off. I turned off the computer and sat quietly, the lamp casting a soft pool of light across the table. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry. I wasn't tired. Just still. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Vera. Did something happen? I can't access the family insurance.
Please call.
I stared at the screen for a long moment. The words were polite, but I could almost hear the panic behind them. I started typing. Everything that happened has already happened. I'm just not pretending anymore. Then I deleted it. They didn't deserve explanations. They thrived on them. Each apology, another thread that kept me tied to the web. Instead, I placed the phone face down, finished my tea, and exhaled slowly. For years, they'd mistaken my silence for submission, my forgiveness for weakness. But silence can be strategy. You don't owe closure to the people who built your cage. I hadn't expected peace, but I had expected silence. After cutting ties and clearing my name from every financial web Callista had ever spun, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd leave me alone for a while. I was wrong. Saturday afternoon, I was sitting in a quiet cafe off Manor Road, nursing a cup of herbal tea and revising program notes for our next grant application. The place smelled like cinnamon and espresso. There was a couple two tables over whispering over matching laptops, and some soft jazz playing overhead. It was the kind of afternoon I used to crave, boring, safe, uninterrupted. My phone buzzed. A direct message. Instagram. From Zinnia. I hadn't heard from her in months. She usually reserved her energy for TikTok and tagging her friends in memes. But her message came with a jolt. Hey, just FYI, Mom's kinda mad. She said you tanked her plans. Oh, and she said Grandpa always said you broke his heart. That true? I stared at the screen. The question sat there like a punch to the ribs, cheerful, casual, coated in glitter. Not how are you? Not what happened. Just a second-hand accusation disguised as a teenage shrug. Callista had told people that I was the reason our father died disappointed. There were so many layers to that single sentence. So much venom tucked behind those few words.
I didn't respond. I didn't even type. I just turned my phone face down and sat in that moment. Let it wash over me. Let it sting. The air around me went sharp. Every cell in my body tightened. Minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time, a text from Callista. We need to talk. Coffee? Just the two of us. I didn't hesitate. Sure, I replied. Name the place. She picked a sleek cafe downtown that doubled as a co-working space, exactly her style. Glossy tables, exposed brick, minimalist menus without milk, everything. The kind of place where appearance trumps substance. I got there first, chose a table near the front window, where I could see every step she took. I wanted light on my side. She walked in 10 minutes late, of course. Sunglasses still on. Lipstick perfect. Hair curled just enough to look effortless. If someone didn't know her, they'd think she was there for a magazine shoot. She slid into the seat across from me, without removing her coat. Blair, she said, all teeth. You've been busy. I sipped my tea, said nothing. You've made quite the mess, she continued, folding her hands neatly. Mom's crying every day. Darian looks like he's about to jump ship. And you've made yourself the victim again. Congrats. Still, I stayed quiet. You think pulling your name off one loan erases your reputation? She went on, voice lower, colder. You think walking away makes you clean? No, I said evenly. But it makes me free. She leaned forward, her smile sharp now. You ruined my deal. Do you know what kind of money was on the table? What kind of credibility I needed?
You used my name without asking, took money tied to my credit, and pretended it was yours to spend. That's not business, Callista. That's theft. Her jaw clenched. You always twist things. Always play the martyr. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Slid it across the table. You recognize that? She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a printout of the jewelry appraisal form, dated 1 year prior. Listed under her name. The heirloom ring. The one Dad gave to me in his will. The one she claimed was probably lost in the move. I watched her eyes flicker. You said you never saw it again, I said. That Dad must have misplaced it. She looked up. The smile was gone now. That ring was mine, I said softly. Not yours to pawn. Not yours to appraise.
Mine. And humiliate.
Her hands tightened around the envelope. You don't understand what it was like. After he died, everything fell on me. You were off saving people. I was grieving, too. You had your little nonprofit bubble, your praise, your donors. You didn't have to deal with Mom, with the house, the bills, the questions. I didn't have to lie, I said. We sat in silence for a beat too long. I'm not here to fight, I added. Just wanted you to know, I see you now. All of it. She exhaled, slow and deliberate, as if trying to calm herself. We're family, Blair. We don't do this to each other. We're not family. You're just someone I survived. I stood, took my coat. Outside, the wind had picked up. I walked slowly down the sidewalk, hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Not rage, not fear, just the weight of finally speaking out loud what I had kept inside for years. A stranger passed and offered a polite smile. I nodded, kept moving. In that moment, I realized she'd never come clean, never apologize, never unravel the web she'd spun. But I didn't need her to. I wasn't looking for an admission. I wasn't after revenge. I was after distance. Sometimes, the most dangerous people smile when they stab. Some battles aren't won with fire. They're won when you walk away with nothing left to burn. The morning started like any other. The sky over Austin was unusually clear, the light crisp with that post-rain sharpness that made everything feel just a little too honest. I brewed my coffee slowly, the kitchen silent except for the faint hiss of the machine and the occasional creak of the hardwood. There was no music. I didn't need help getting in the mood. I was already there. By 9:30, I'd printed and labeled 3 folders, each one thick, organized, and painfully deliberate. Folder 1, financial records, itemized and dated. Folder 2, screenshots, emails, messages, changes in paperwork. Folder 3, notarized legal withdrawal from every shared trust and arrangement that ever had my name attached to theirs. On each manila cover, I wrote one name. Callista. Vera. Law office. 3 stops. 3 truths. I slipped them into my bag and changed into a navy blue sweater and slacks. Simple, but intentional. Not dramatic, not too soft. I wanted to look exactly how I felt finished. At 10:15, I walked into the lobby of Callista's office building. The receptionist, a young man with perfect posture and gelled hair, barely looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked. I set the folder on the counter. "It's for Callista Walker."
He reached for it and I paused.
"Tell her," I said, "it's from the family failure." His brows lifted slightly, confused. I didn't care. I turned around and walked out, never breaking stride. I didn't wait to see if she came running. She wouldn't. Not because she didn't care, but because she'd know exactly what that folder meant the second she opened it. I walked 2 blocks to the law office. It was tucked between a bank and a juice bar, the kind of place that whispered money and discretion. My attorney, Mark Powell, had been recommended years ago when I first incorporated Women Forward. I trusted him, not with my heart, but with the kind of quiet precision that made women like me feel safe again. We sat across from each other in a quiet conference room with heavy wood furniture and no windows. "This is everything," I told him, handing over the 3rd folder. "I want it all finalized today." He flipped through the documents, nodding. You're sure you want to remove both names?
Yes.
Even from the contingency clause?
I tapped the last page.
Add a line. If either party contests this document, they forfeit all rights to future claims.
He looked up.
That's going to send a message.
I smiled faintly.
It's not a message. It's a boundary.
He made the changes, and I signed every page without hesitation.
It took 42 minutes to legally sever every financial and inheritance-based tie I had to my mother and sister. When it was done, Mark placed the final document in a protective sleeve and slid it toward me.
I'm not angry anymore, I said, slipping it into my bag. I'm just done.
The words felt heavier than I expected.
Not sharp, not vengeful, just true. By noon, I was back in my car, the sun pouring in through the windshield. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence felt earned. It wasn't until 3:45 p.m. that my phone rang.
Vera.
I let it buzz 3 times before answering.
Hello.
Blair, what did you do? Her voice was higher than usual, tight with panic.
Callista's deal fell apart.
The investors pulled out.
She said you destroyed the trust documents.
They're talking about legal action. Blair, what the hell did you do?
I took a deep breath.
I told the truth.
Your golden girl forged her throne with my name.
I just removed it.
You didn't have to be so cruel.
I laughed quietly.
You're right.
I could have been cruel.
I wasn't.
I was clean.
She paused.
We're family.
No, I replied.
Your blood.
That's not the same thing.
I hung up before she could say anything else.
That night, I sat on my balcony,
legs tucked beneath me, sipping peppermint tea.
I didn't feel triumphant.
I didn't feel hollow either.
Just still.
The moon was low, and the street below was quiet.
Someone walked a dog.
A kid's skateboard passed in the distance.
Normal life moved on.
Inside, I placed the remaining folder, my copy, into the bottom drawer of my desk. Then I lit a small candle and let it burn as I cleaned up the kitchen. When I passed by the hall mirror, I stopped, looked at myself for a long moment, not searching for flaws, not picking myself apart, just recognizing. I'd waited my whole life for them to apologize, to wake up and see me. But maybe the real power wasn't in being seen, it was in walking away before they ever got the chance. Some battles aren't won with fire. They're won when you walk away with nothing left to burn. Some battles aren't won with fire. They're won when you walk away with nothing left to burn. That line stayed with me through the cold stillness of the days that followed. It was late November now, the kind of morning where the light feels like it's already giving up early. I was sipping coffee by the window, watching leaves chase each other down the sidewalk, when Alohan's name popped up in my inbox. No greeting, no pleasantries, just a forward. Subject line: Family estate planning, new session. Vera had sent it out the night before. A meeting scheduled for next week at the same lawyer's office Callista and I had walked into countless times growing up. Only this time, my name wasn't on the list of invitees. Alohan's message was brief. Thought you should know. I stared at it for a second, then hit delete. There was no sting, no ache, not even irritation. Just quiet confirmation that I had made the right call. That afternoon, I returned to Mark Powell's office, my lawyer. We finalized the last of the documents, my own will, now written entirely on my terms. I left 90% of everything I owned to Women Forward. The other 10% went to a local shelter I used to volunteer at before the nonprofit took over my life. Nothing to my family. Not out of spite, just math. They'd stopped being my people the day they left. Mark looked up after witnessing my signature. That's everything, he said. Unless you want to add a clause about. I already did, I replied. If anyone contests the will, they lose all claims. He gave a short nod, clicked his pen shut, and said, It's rare, but every now and then, someone makes a clean exit. You did it. I smiled faintly. Clean's the only thing I ever wanted from them. I took the final copy, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my bag. Instead of heading straight home, I drove out past the city limits, where the cemeteries stretch long and wide, tucked behind rustling oak trees and chain-link fences.
I hadn't been to Dad's grave in years. Not because I didn't care, but because it had hurt too much to sit in front of that stone and pretend everything was okay. This time, I came with purpose. I brought a copy of the letter he'd written me, the one I found tucked in the old file box weeks ago. And the family ring, my ring. I knelt in front of his headstone, ran my fingers over the engraved name. The air was brisk, the kind that made your breath visible and your voice smaller. I don't need the proof anymore, I whispered. I just needed to remember I was never the failure. I laid the letter and ring beside the stone, tucked carefully under a small rock to keep them in place. I didn't stay long. Just enough to say goodbye properly, not to him, but to the version of me that had been begging for someone else's validation for too many years. Back home, the apartment felt warmer than usual. I lit a candle, peeled off my coat, and poured a glass of water. Then I pulled out a notebook from the drawer, one I hadn't used in a while, and began writing down everything I'd kept in my head since the last fallout. But this time, it wasn't a journal entry.
It was a workshop outline.
How to walk away, boundaries, and rebuilding after family betrayal. I was scheduled to teach the session at the nonprofit's Winter Summit in 2 weeks. Later that evening, I cooked a simple dinner, roasted vegetables, brown rice, a soft-boiled egg. Ate alone at the table with no music, no distractions.
Just me.
And it was enough. After cleaning up, I opened the mail. One envelope stood out. A thank you card from a young woman named Mia who had gone through our empowerment program. I've never felt safe before. You made it feel possible.
Thank you.
I placed the card next to the small candle still burning on the counter. There was no grand romance waiting for me at this point in life. No redemption arc from the people who once called me their own. But there was freedom. And that, I'd come to understand, was far better than applause. I walked out onto the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, and watched the moon climb behind the buildings. They wanted me small, I murmured to the night air. So I stayed silent, until I realized I wasn't meant to fit their frame. I was meant to build my own gallery. Back inside, the candle had burned low. I didn't blow it out. I let it finish on its own, slow, unbothered, complete. Some legacies are inherited. Mine was built from scratch. Sometimes, the people we fight hardest to keep in our lives are the very ones quietly cutting us down. Blair's story reminds us that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You don't have to stay somewhere you're not seen, valued, or respected. Have you ever been made to feel like the family failure for simply choosing yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful,